The Krasue DLC arrived in DBD at the end of September this year, and it's no secret that it was absurdly broken. This raises a question. Do the devs have no idea what they are doing, that's why they so frequently release completely unbalanced and new DLCs, or is this intentional, as a sales strategy? It's worth remembering that DBD is an extremely profitable game. In this chart it ranks 4th among the best-selling games on Steam in the first week of July, and even though it seems like a small game, DBD attracts millions of players every year, and there's always a peak of players when a new DLC is released, making this a crucial time for developers to sell their DLCs and make a lot of money. With this in mind, I'll analyze all DLCs from March 2023 to October 2025 to show you how behavior manipulates DBD's meta to force users to buy DLCs and how they make a lot of money from it. Act 1. It all begins in March 2023 with the school merchant. The idea seemed good, drones, surveillance, technological killer, but in practice it became a true horror. Not because of its appearance, not because of its power, but because of its ability to hold the game. Players reported endless matches, farms exploded, saying it ruined the meta. It was possible to hold the game indefinitely or until the DBD server shut down, which took an hour. In this context, there was a historic match between CM9I, a relatively new player, against the world's biggest competitive team, Eternal. And even though he lost, this player proved his point. He held the game for over 50 minutes. And if the best team of the world suffered for over 50 minutes against a relatively new player, imagine what the average public DBD match was like at that time. This killer was possibly behavior's biggest mistake. The developers couldn't make them adapt to the game, so they had to adapt the entire game to it. A few months later, a new mechanic called anti-regen emerged, something never before thought. The killer could no longer hold a regen because now the entity would block the gems after 8 regressions. Furthermore, the entire gen regression meta had to be changed. Perks like Eruption, Call of Brine, Pop, and Ring. All of this had to be changed simply because of School Merchant's existence. A very controversial new perk also appeared in this DLC, the Background Player, which gave an absurd speed when the killer picked someone up, and has dominated the Survivors meta for many months because it was extremely powerful for making pallet saves, flashlight saves, or flashbang saves. And it was also nerfed later. Its pattern is really simple. A new DLC release with an extremely broken killer or perk, players buy it to test it out while it's not nerfed yet, or the more naive ones think it will still this way forever. It has an initial sales spike, and after a few weeks, when sales drop, behavior releases a balanced patch. Act 2. Singularity. 3 months later, the Singularity arrived in DBD, a very interesting killer with a sci-fi feel. But the community quickly realized it was a strong three-gen killer. Not as strong as a Skill Merchant because you could remove the cameras from a little further away, and had a slightly easier counterplay, which was the MPs, and the Singularity was a very strong killer for slugging as well. One of its perks, Forced Hesitation, had the effect of slowing all nearby survivors when downing a survivor. Perk could prove extremely powerful for tunneling someone after forcing a hook trade. But let's put it all aside and pretend this killer came perfectly balanced for the game. Even so, this DLC would have a huge problem, which was Gabriel Soma's new perk, made for this. MFT granted 3% of speed when injured and 10 seconds of endurance when finished healing another survivor. These are two very strong effects in just one perk, but this 3% in particular is the major problem. The math is a bit complicated, but this 3% is much more than it seems. Let's put the survivor's speed and the killer's speed next to each other. Survivor's speed is 4.0 meters per second. Let's take this as 100%. Killers in general are 4.6, which would be 115%, and there are some specific killers who are 4.4, mainly projectile killers. With MFT, the survivor's speed is 103%. The speed difference between the survivor and the killer decreases by 20%, because now it's 103 compared to 115. And this difference is even greater when the killer is 4.4. It goes from 103 to 110. So the speed difference between the killer and the survivor decreases more than 30% if it's 4.4. If you don't quite understood the math, that's okay. What I want you to understand is this. Either behavior released an extremely broken killer to force players to buy the DLCs, or a very strong perk, both for killers and for survivors, to ensure high sales. And obviously, after a few months of declining sales, the MFT was nerfed. Act 3. Later the same year, the Xenomorph was released, and surprisingly, it was a balanced killer. It had anti-loop, mobility, and a bit of stealth. I can't complain about this killer. But that didn't stop this DLC from being one of the most problematic in DBD's history. First, the DLC cost was higher than normal. The developers thought it was a good idea to do a bundle sale. That's right, the DLC included a mandatory alien skin, which increased the price. But the biggest problem with this DLC, without a doubt, was the Ultimate Weapon perk. This perk revealed the survivor's position on the entire map by just opening a locker. Here's a Reddit post saying the Ultimate Weapon is broken, a free roll hack of every 30 seconds, and this perk completely dominated the meta. Staff was completely destroyed because the killer always knew where everyone was, and the survivor's meta also changed because of this. Extortion and Calm Spirit became extremely common as an anti-meta to deny this information. It was undoubtedly one of the most annoying survivors metas of all time. So here's the point. Behavior even getting the killer right released an absurdly broken perk to increase sales and force everyone to buy it, and forcing the DBD's meta to adapt. Act 4. Later the same year, Chucky was released, which was also quite strong, but not enough to break the game, and with him came a perk that remains the meta to this day, Friends to the End. This perk exposes the obsession and reveals itself for a few seconds. It also has the effect of changing the obsession, which synergizes with other perks. Chucky was also nerfed, but in this case the community didn't really like this nerf and they reversed the changes. In this case, they didn't go overboard. They created both a killer and a perk strong, but not enough to break the game. Act 5. In 2024, we had the release of Alan Wake and Lara Croft as DLCs for Only Survivor, and chapters of The Unknown, The Leech, and Dracula. These chapters were much more balanced than those in 2023, nothing too broken or absurd. Some perks entered the meta like Champ of Light and Finis, Lara Croft and Alan Wake, and Vecna was the second most lethal killer in the game. He has the second highest kill rate in the game since the last data released by Behavior. However, 2024 didn't end well because of the last DLC, which was the HoundMaster. It was a very controversial killer at launch because she was strong but extremely buggy. The dog was very buggy and indoor maps were extremely horrible and inconsistent. This took a while to be adjusted, and that's why it's still hard to see anyone playing it. Still, a good player can demonstrate that this killer has the potential to be very strong in matches. Nevertheless, the main problem with this DLC was Tower's new perk, Shoulder the Burden, which allows you to steal a hook state from another survivor. Perk very rare to see playing solo. In a Swift, it's extremely strong because the players are organized. You can see in Strix, for example, that this perk's always present. And an organized team can use it in an absurd way, which completely breaks the killer's game, and forces them to rotate many hooks. It's no wonder it's a banned perk in comp, even against S-tier killers. Act 6, The Ghould and Springtrap. Kaneki was the first killer released in 2025. Despite all the controversies surrounding him being an anime character like the killer, the Ghould was very controversial in his gameplay because he was considered too easy. This killer has an absurd mobility, anti-loop, he can jump over windows and pallets, powerful add-ons like blocking the window after jumping, the so-called kidnap tech, which was only fixed 3 months later, but his main issue was his auto-aim. Kaneki arrived in the game with an auto-aim on the survivor that basically ensured the hit. Some people say he's an improved Legion because it was Legion before the killer who would injure everyone. Now Kaneki flies across the map, and the same dash he uses for mobility, he already injures the survivor with an auto-aim off the side of a fridge. A few weeks later, as always, a nerf arrived. His auto-aim was cut in half, some numbers were tweaked, and later the kidnap tech was removed. Even after these nerfs, the character remains one of the strongest in the game. Many survivors say that there is no way to dodge his first hit. The MFT, which had been nerfed to only work in DP wounds, was back to the meta with the release of the Ghould, because the killer became so frequently that this specific perk, which only worked against him, was worth using. Undoubtedly, making killers easier and more accessible contributes well to their popularity. Some people say that the Gould's giant auto-aim is an accessibility mechanism to make life easier for controller players. Well, then bring the Nobel Peace Prize to Behavior, right? After 9 years of the game, they decided to think about the console players. But you know what else this DLC had? Advantages of using a legendary skin. Anyone who has played at least one game of Kaneki knows that its creature screams a lot, both in lobby and during the match. It might be cool at first, kinda immersive, right? But imagine playing all day listening to this noise. It would be a problem, right? But don't worry, there is a solution. Behavior sells not only the problem but the solution as well. Reese's legendary skin, which costs 3 times as much as Kaneki, is much quieter than him. She doesn't scream in the lobby or during the matches, so if you don't like the idea of going deaf while playing, or want to hear better the survivor's footsteps without a Ken Kaneki yelling in your ear, pay 15 bucks to Behavior and you have the solution. Speaking of pay to win, the upcoming Springtrap DLC has the same problem. Springtrap is extremely noisy, which greatly hinders your stealth. After all, what's the point of staying undetectable if the survivor can hear your footsteps a mile away? The legendary Glitch Trap skin is extremely quiet. His footsteps are very difficult to hear, so once again Behavior saw the problem and the solution on the same DLC. The Walking Dead DLC came without a killer, so there's not much to comment on. And finally we arrived to Act 7, Krasue, Sinister Grace. In September 2025, Krasue arrived in DBD and it was received as the strongest killer ever released, even stronger than Nerfs, which for years was considered the strongest in the game, dominating all tier lists. This Reddit post says, Krasue's making Nerfs look like a balanced killer, she's that strong. The killer was already extremely strong in PvP, at most needing minor adjustments to her farm transitions, and they buffed that from the PvP to the live game, but they also buffed the power time, decreased her vaulting time, increased her turnaround, and also reduced the number of fungi on the map by 50%, which is the only way for survivors to eliminate the infection. So the killer went from being a bit strong to something absurd, even comparable to Nerfs. And I don't even disagree with those who say she's the strongest in the game, and they released an emergency patch notes a few days later. But it didn't do much, so we'll probably see more nerfs to Krasue, but only when the devs see that the sales are declining. Is it a coincidence that practically all DLCs from 2023 to 2025 brought broken killers or perks that were only nerfs after supposedly declining sales? Or is Behavior manipulating the meta to boost DLC sales and keep the game at the top of the charts? Furthermore, practice like bundle skin sales to increase the value of DLCs alongside expensive legendary skins that provide gameplay advantages, the infamous pay-to-win, like Reese and Glitch Trap, don't help to suggest that this is unintentional. There's no documentary proof of this intention since Behavior sales profits aren't public, but the pattern of releasing something broken and nerfing it a few weeks later is impossible to ignore. So what do you think? Is Behavior just messing up their testing? Are they just dumb and incapable of balancing their own game? Or do you think there is more in this history? Comment below what you think and share this video with your friend who bought Krasue just to win with no effort. In the end, I'll let YouTube decide which is the best video for you, and I'll see you there.